Nick Buchanan joins us again to talk about one of his favourite books, third novel by William Golding, Pincher Martin. So, Nick, tell us a little bit about this book.
Okay, well, first I came to this by the route of knowing a little bit about Lord of the Flies first, which was his first book and such a big hit. In many ways, I think most of his subsequent novels since are actually more interesting. But it began with Lord of the Flies and then The Inheritors, which is a remarkable book about the innocent early man and the rise of the Neanderthals and the predatory nature, and thus the fall of a very kind of innocent society, written in a fantastic language with very short words and sounds. And then this book, Pincher Martin, which I had a friend who was doing English literature degree at the same time I was doing my graphic design degree, and we used to share with one another what we were learning. So in that way, I kind of got the best of both worlds. And he was doing Pincher Martin on his degree course, and he bought me a copy, and I read it, which is that very copy you've got there. And I was just astounded. I mean, the level of language, it's written in a very heightened language that's, it's almost poetry. It's almost a book of complete poetry. And reading it, one is put into a very heightened state of awareness, because Golding chooses his language very, very carefully. And he tends to write these unusual novels. They're quite unlike any other. They usually curl around notions of a fable, but where we go on the journey with the fable, we learn so much about what it means to be human, and ultimately in Pincher Martin, about consciousness itself. I think in Pincher Martin, he's able to imagine himself into situations as a writer that are just beyond me. I mean, the opening of the book is about a drowning man who is blasted in a war situation off the bridge of a ship and is thrown into the depths of the ocean. And if I could just read the opening,
sure.
It'll give you a sense of this heightened sense of language. He was struggling in every direction. He was the centre of the writhing and kicking knot of his own body. There was no up or down, no light and no air. He felt his mouth open of itself, and the shrieked word burst out, "Help!" When the air had gone with the shriek, water came in to fill its place, burning water, hard in the throat and mouth, as stones that hurt. And on it goes. There's quite a few pages of that.
It's all downhill from there, really,
well,
isn't it?
For Pincher it is. But this imagination that can conceive what it must feel like to have water rushing in one's throat is phenomenal. And he does this again and again throughout the book. I mean, there's a scene where he's starving later on. He finds his way to a desert island, although it's not quite as it seems.
A deserted island rather than a desert island.
Yes, that would be very apt. And because in Pincher Martin, we kind of understand as we continue to read that the guy has actually drowned on page 2, and he lets out a shriek to say "mother," which is supposedly the dying words of anyone, and he only gets as far as moth, and there's a hyphen, and the guy drowns. But refuses to give up his consciousness or his soul or his identity. I fumble for words because we are talking about a disembodied state. But just to get back to the poetic language again, there's a bit where he's on this self-constructed deserted island, and he believes he's starving, and in his pocket he finds some silver foil, and this paper is from a chocolate bar, and he searches it agonizingly in the sunlight, and all these tiny facets of silver shimmering, are beautifully described. And then he finds one little shard of chocolate and he puts it on his tongue as an act of survival. And Golding writes, it stung with an agonizing sweetness and then was gone. And that is the taste and the sensation of chocolate from somebody who's starving. It's incredible. And he does this again and again with such great ease and deftness as a writer, that he gives the reader the experience of what it's like to drown, what it's like to taste chocolate when you're starving, etc. Well,
if people weren't aware of it before, I hope they're aware of it now. It's a fantastic novel, and he's a great writer. So thanks very much for coming along and talking earlier on about your book, What Happens in Shakespeare's King Lear, and talking so compellingly about Pincher Martin.
Thank you.
That's all from us this week. We'll see you next week for another edition of Arts Alive Books.